So I do in some way and do not agree 100% with this article, but I do understand the intent of it. Because as I've said before, the back in the Cameron years, as bizarre as that is to think about now, but back in the Cameron years, there was very much a similar idea for trying to level up the North called the Northern Powerhouse. And this was put together by David Cameron and George Osborne. Now, this was, in practice, a quite good idea of essentially funneling and creating a lot of investment opportunities using, again, the government's money to invest in the North. Not only was it considered such a good plan, even the EU said that it wanted to get involved in this plan as well, because it would have meant a massive investment in not only infrastructure, transport, jobs here in the North. And if it had worked, the idea was to, again, roll it out, maybe, iron out the kinks, see what worked, see what didn't, but also to really heavily engage local areas, local authorities as to what they need in their in their areas. And if you're saying, well, that sounds very, very, very familiar, it was because, again, the man in charge of producing the new leveling up white paper was, of course, Aberdeen boy, can see in his face with the glasses. I've forgotten his name. He was caught clubbing recently. Oh, I can't remember his name. It escapes me. Michael Gove, that's it. Yes, Michael Gove. Yes, Michael Gove. Sorry, his name I could see his face, but his name completely escaped me. Michael Gove was actually also heavily involved in the original Northern Powerhouse stuff. But of course, it didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because in reality, the Tories really didn't care about leveling up these areas. However, now they're in a slightly different situation. Not only have they won those seats in those areas and promised that they would deliver, and coming up in the next general election, to essentially make sure that they win and remain in power means that they will have to try and retain those seats. And so far, they have really done nothing to deliver for those areas. And again, the brochure and the white paper for leveling up, again, looks impressive, is all talk, but that is it. Unless we actually see some very serious action. And remember, the Northern Powerhouse was around for about almost 8 years before it essentially finally died, when obviously Cameron left office. And of course, the Brexit vote happened as well. So ultimately, I highly suspect we will see history repeat itself with this whole leveling up idea and leveling up agenda. But unless we actually start to see some serious policy of putting forward these ideas, it ain't going to happen. I can tell you now, some of the ideas in that stuff are perfect for what the North needs. But unless the Tories are actually serious about leveling up, and we've said before, leveling up actually means they need to put in the serious readies for it, the money. And if they aren't prepared to put in the money for it, then there is basically, this is just a massive showpiece. And ultimately, I think that's what it indeed does boil down to. However, we'll get into this article, which again sort of shared my view of saying, hey, the Northern Powerhouse is a good idea, but the Tories aren't putting any money to it and they aren't actually trying to kickstart it and get the ball rolling on this. So let's go diving into this and find out more about it. So, as always, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to those people who support the channel that way. So, this goes over to The Guardian with the title of, "This may come as a surprise, but I think the Tories' levelling up policy has got it right." There are transformative moments in politics, especially when the opposition gets gifted the political agenda. In the 1970s, it was the power of the trade unions and inflation that gave the Tories control of the narrative. Just as after the 2008, it was the aftermath of the financial crisis, and today, COVID and Brexit have combined to make the condition of the people and the numbers of the number one political issue. The question of course, how to react to this threatens to overwhelm a Tory party that is divided between its libertarian wing and its one nation advocates, and whose leader is very self-evidently unfit for high office. It is in a new transformative moment that the news last week of the January inflation hit at least a 30-year high of at least 5.5%. To produce the biggest cost of living squeeze for over 60 years, and its backdrop to a mounting social crisis. And of course, this pressure is reflected in a falling birth rate and stagnating, even deadlining now life expectancy. And of course, the desperately unfair life choice chances, the disempowerment, the justified post-Brexit economic pessimism, and social neglect, all alongside the phenomenal private wealth. Alongside this, the phenomenal private wealth. Labour, of course, for the first time in 15 years, has a chance to command this agenda and to do its opponents for what was actually once done to it. Levelling up is, of course, the talismanic policy that brings all this together. Boris Johnson, for all his glaring deficiencies, had the wait and see that it was his aligned campaign genius, or whether it was just this devalued Europhiles think that the compelling case for Brexit that won the 2016 referendum and, of course, the 2019 general election. Rather, it was the massive dissatisfaction of millions of working class voters with the status quo. There had to be change, and levelling up, who needs this reinforced by the lethal unfairness of COVID, represents his very personal commitment to actually deliver that change. Except as with the recent white paper on the levelling up, reveals in a way that his drafters never even imagined. And this Conservative Party just cannot deliver. The first 2/3 of this are all one intellectually exciting but actually finally disappointing document is ultimately the best the government analysis of Britain's economic and social failings I have ever read. It is hard not to be impressed by the very scrupulous marshalling of the devastating data, ranging from the slow travel to work times to the disproportionately higher prevalence of obesity in left behind Britain. And of course, it's social science at its best. It recognizes that many of the self-reinforcing cases of this cruel inequity require numerous self-reinforcing responses. If the foundational framework it outlines is followed through, it could deliver. As the paper says, a generational 2.5 trillion increase in national output over and above what growth Britain might have is otherwise expected. It is a fabulous, shall we say, national prize. Except in the last third of the paper, this demonstrates how far away such mobilization it is, and of course the thinness of the government's own planned response. For some time, the economic theory has been moving away from the simplistic market is magic doctrines that have defined the past 40 years. And the White Paper's opening chapter marks the very first decisive open rupture with the orthodoxy. The new consensus is to focus on how the state must mobilize and integrate the six capitals: human, financial, intangible, physical, institutional, and social, together to constitute the six-cylinder model of trying to drive growth and, in particular, catalyzing the growing sedendities available in dense populated cities. This is the Medici effect, the so-called because of the growth of the culturally and economically vibrant city-states of the Italian Renaissance. It is combining these algorithmical effects, which, with the right amounts of varying capital brought together by empowered, self-confident local leaders, which is the alchemy of the self-amplifying growth. No great economy can obviously be built on a weak society, and no great society can be built with a weak economy. They both need inspiring local leadership, and none of this is rocket science. Even if it is a breakthrough for a Tory government, it does require systemic change. And of course, Chapter 2 calls just for that. It is scathing about the consequences of the too much political centralisation and his constant chopping and changing of the Westminster-driven policies. 40 policies between 1975 and 2015 to actually promote regional growth, and the bewildering plethora of at least 100 subscale mini funds and pots of money for which the local authorities have to bid, often with wholly different criteria. Instead, it argues there needs to be consistency over time, a massive streamlining of all the varying funds, and a national consensus over interconnecting missions behind what the country can actually mobilize. It suggests at least 12, ranging from spreading out national research and development budget to more fairly target and improve life expectancy. And progress must be regularly publicly recorded. And above all, by 2030, every citizen could have the opportunity of being led by a local empowered mayor to make these missions happen. So far, so good. That is, of course, when you hit the chapter on policy. And of course, the suffocating veto of Rishi Sunak's Treasury is all too obvious. The imagination and verse disappear, and instead the streamlining of all those subscale pots of money with white paper boasts about behind them, built up by British businesses and infrastructure banks to support local enterprise. Forget it. Serious transport investment so that the journey times and frequencies match those of London? A joke. A search in vain for serious investment in social infrastructure, a new response to institutions that might be decentralized to support the six-cylinder capital's growth, a model in our localities, conspicuous by their absence. The aim of creating a once globally competitive city in each of our regions is noble, but it'll be over Sunak's dead body. Nor is there any recognition that British capitalism is itself in sorely need of a makeover with its delivery in its part. This is where Labour can come in and pick up the thread. The country is ready to rally behind genuine levelling up. Money, issue 100 paper or even a perpetual bonds to finance this virtual capital spending. Create the institutions that will work with these newly empowered mayors to revitalize our economy and society. Around, of course, the drive to net zero England, from the Tyne to the Humber. This could reindustrialize around manufacturing wind farms, turbines, electric cars, and even batteries. Get back into the single market and export those very green manufactories into the EU. The economic prospects for the next few years are dire, and a shaking working populations, diminished trade, squeezing demands, and stagnating investment all together with the risk of falling house prices as interest rates rise. Against that outlook, Britain cannot let the potential of a 2.5 trillion extra output go begging. The narrative of the foundational framework as the prize are there for the taking, and all that is required is the chutzpah and the vision to go for it. And I agree with what was said in some of that white paper, especially the opening verse about the problems that Britain was facing today in society. The fact that there is, again, 2.5 trillion pounds worth that could be added to the economy from doing this. The problem is, of course, you have the libertarian right wing of the Tory party that has just said, we ain't going to do any bit of that. We ain't going to do anything like that. And as was said there, it's all down to Rishi Sunak's veto. And you'd think that maybe Boris might go to Rishi and say, yo, Rishi, this ain't going to happen. You're going to put the money into this. But of course, he isn't, because, again, he's incredibly self-serving. Because if he did that, those right-wing libertarians would very quickly throw him out. And not only that, they would kill any of those policies stone dead. So this is a fantastic opportunity for Labour to drive home some really true transformational policies in the UK that could really affect them. As was said there, right at the end, they could do it, but they just have to be brave enough and willing enough to be able to do it. And I hope we do go in that direction, but we just need to be brave. That's the main key thing here, being brave about it, because we know the Tories aren't going to deliver the true change that this country desperately needs. So it's now, only to now, Labour who can really deliver the change for the country. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-up link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.